Welcome to the GMS Magazine podcast. This is a podcast all about board games, role playing games, and the people who make them. Sometimes only the people who play them. I am one of your co hosts, Paco Garcia.
And this is Chris from DSX Machina. I just realized we have matching shirts.
Yours
has something on it.
Yeah,
the Grand Trunk Clacks.
Yeah.
I just squirreled. That's wonderful. I have nothing on my shirt at all.
This is a T-shirt that was given to me by a company that I don't think they are any longer publishing board games, but they did publish a few Terry Pratchett-based themed board games, and Clacks is one of them. Clacks is a system of communication. It's kind of like a Moore system. It's in one of Terry Pratchett's novels, and they made a game of it, and it's actually quite good fun.
So, speaking of game companies that are defunct or non-existent, as we spear into what I kind of discovered, how much do you know about the new TSR fiasco?
I know they no longer exist.
So here's a funny thing.
Yeah.
So there's it's TSR, and you have new TSR, you have Wonderfield, Giantlands, and all of that. It appears that its founder had a public meltdown on X, also known as Twitter, and was surprising because I always got this is where I need to do some reading up here to kind of figure out what was going on. But that was obviously an organization with several people, two of which I have passed on. And the remaining person within Wonderfield is basically claiming to have been the person responsible for the success of the company.
Yeah, because that's been such a resounding success from the beginning.
Well, what I found was really weird is that his public meltdown talked about they rallied against what they called the Trumpsies, in reference to Trump Nazis. And he apparently disliked the fact that the company had become a magnet for them. He said he claimed his personal heritage as Hispanic and Native American made him a target for hate, and said he never intended his work to appeal to conservative or traditional RPG fans. He described the fan base as bigots who thought Giantlands and Wonderfield are for them, when in fact, it isn't.
I hope that one day, just one, I don't need him to hear this more than one day, but one day he's going to hear me say, fuck the fuck out, you motherfucker. I mean, you started.
Tell me what you really think.
Seriously. I mean, you started the company by literally saying no politics in games, everybody has his place at the table. You start spewing anti-woke shit. James Stewart goes and joins the company and begins to spew shit like that also, as did Ernie at the beginning. You keep going on and on and on, being supported by people like RPG Pundit, who are absolute complete Trump heads. And now you're saying that you didn't intend for your company to become the RPG paradise of bigots, racists, homophobes, trans arse leakers? Fuck off. Fuck off. And I am being subtle.
So I absolutely adore the fact that the right are now accusing Wonderfield of being woke. That's the post. I'm literally in my research for this podcast today. I have seen posts from people. For example, this person posted this on the rpgsite.com. For those not current, WFD or Wonderfield Games is the new moniker for what was previously the TSR New TSR revival attempt. As predicted, they are openly woke.
They have never, ever for a second been woke beyond saying everybody should be welcome on the table and no politics in games, which is far from being woke. Far. So, WTF. Sorry, being subtle again. I cannot hear you. You're silenced. We are reinitiating the recording now. Right, sorry, a few humans. Technical problem. I was waxing lyrical about Wonderfield and NewTSR and that asshole.
So the interesting comment for me was their post is that in fact we worked with a lot with Larry Elmore, Steve Once, and Jeff D to make the art for Giantlands more representative and inclusive. The premise: what if in the future there were no white people? James Ward loved it too. Larry always tried to sneak in people of color into his TSR art, though he was often denied his attempts to make D&D less white. So we decolonized the RPG and made a future where the USA and white people don't exist. So this was an actual post by Wonderfield, and I thought it was very interesting. And then we get the supposed meltdown on Wonderfield, where this gentleman claims that they have not made a sale in 2 years.
Surprise.
So it almost seems like they were trying to pull back, but it was just kind of too little, too late. And the end result, not long after, the Wonderfield X page vanished. It no longer exists. And then additionally, once you go to the Wonderfield.games website, it is also down. It says, sorry, we're doing some work on the site. Thank you for being patient. And I contain your reaction. So yeah, it's a very, sometimes I always feel like I'm missing something to the story. It's just very weird to have that happen in that fashion.
Well, the thing we're missing to the story is that this guy lies constantly. I mean, I know Jeff D from having interacted with him on social media, on Facebook. And I can tell you something about him for certain, and is that he will not tolerate bigotry. He's the kind of guy who is more than happy and willing to smash anyone over an ethical issue. So I am not prepared to believe that there has been any kind of intervention on the part of Jeff that would lead to any kind of racist or xenophobic or any kind of phobic behavior or content within anything to do with Wonderfield. I would be very surprised if these people not just managed to get Larry Elmore involved, but even if they could afford to get Larry Elmore involved. Larry doesn't need this kind of gig, like, at all. When we're talking about Larry Elmore, he is one of the gods of D&D art.
Yeah.
He doesn't need this shit, ever. And the thing is that Larry is a very sweet, nice man. I just don't believe that he would get involved in this bullshit. So no, I think what we're missing is that there are an awful lot of lies and obfuscation going on, an awful lot of inventions from this guy and fantasies.
Right.
I just, wish that this website had disappeared a long time ago or ever become a thing, to be honest. This website has only done damage. It did damage to the people who were running TSR before they decided to start this rubbish. It's hurt an awful lot of people who had to withstand the abuse of all these fans that now they bemoan they have. An awful lot of people have been hurt with the promises of products that were never going to happen. The reputation of a lot of people has suffered. Ernie suffered an awful lot of backlash for being involved with this guy. I remember Janelle Jacquet feeling really betrayed by the way that Ernie was behaving when he said that they didn't want to go with identity politics in this new endeavor. And Janelle was quite hurt by that. So, yeah, this is the kind of companies that I wish had never ever existed. And I hope that one of the reasons they've gone down is because whatever agreement it is that they reached with Wizards of the Coast when Wizards of the Coast sued their pants off them has left them completely and utterly penniless. And now they're gone because of that. I hope so.
If and hoping, as it's no, I'm not trading on fragile ground here, but back at the beginning of the fiasco, there were two companies vying for the TSR brand,
Yes.
and the PSR brand got so stained from the fiasco with NewTSR that the competing company changed their names to Solarian.
Correct. And
And
I know the owner, and believe me, I would put my hand on fire for him.
well, they, like I said, on a positive note, just a few days ago, their top secret game is now available on Amazon with free shipping. So I'm actually really curious because as someone who owned the original box set, I'd be really fascinated to see what they're doing with this IP.
I would love if Jason were able to get back into being TSR and try to undo all the damage that these people have done to both the brand and TSR's past, because they have really soiled the memory of what TSR once was for an awful lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. And so with that out of the way, there's a company called Maestro Media that is doing an agreement with Asmodee Distribution, Asmodee getting larger by the second.
Mhm.
And they, the only thing I knew them from is that they raised a couple $1 million making a Binding of Isaac board game. Not a huge fan of Binding of Isaac for various reasons, but looked at and realized that they have a Kickstarter going on right now, and they have three games, which all of which have not really released. I think one's released, and I'm not saying I'm not interested, but I'm baffled by their IP choices. So they came out with a Hello Kitty Day at the Park board game.
Okay.
That raised $139,000 last November. They have a Smurfs game called Hidden Village, which is due out, which I think has come out because there are already some reviews out for it. They have a board game based off of Clash of Clans. In my opinion, incredibly one of the other predatory, online mobile games. It's currently at 578,000 with 18 days to go, which seems to me like a low number for a big mini board game. It just seems weird that something at one point was one of the biggest mobile games on the planet, Clash of Clans, would
Mm.
only raise about $500,000. But they have 1,900 backers, and that's just not even all of it. They also are releasing a one versus all board game based off of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I don't think I've ever seen a weirder IP tie-in than to tap a 60-year-old movie that I don't think any modern board gamers have even seen. I mean, I saw. Yeah, we did there was a Planet of the Apes game, which I played, which was very much tapping the original IP. But there is still some brand recognition there. They're still making this stuff. And we were just talking to a guy who does a lot of writing for that series. Does a lot of novels, um, and um, and I find it's just weird. Andrew Gaskus,
Yeah.
I was blanking on his name, but he was doing a lot of writing for Planet of the Apes. So I appreciated the fact that there was still some adherence to that, but no one's even talking about the Odyssey. I mean, you're talking to someone who adores that series. 2001 is one of my favorite movies. 2010 is one of my favorite movies, which very few people say. And I've read the two sequels that Clark wrote before his passing, and so I know them quite well. And even I have to admit, like, and then it's a one versus all, and I feel to me that it just seems like it's kind of one of those IP slaps.
Hmm.
They thought, hey, we can get the 2001 IP. Let's do a one versus all where Hal is trying to kill everybody on board the Discovery. Now, for those people who remember, there were only two other people on the Discovery that were conscious. And this one allows it's one versus many up to five players. So one Hal up to four other players. So they're definitely really twisting and bending the IP around to make this work. I don't know much about this. It comes out in 2025. There are no reviews yet. From a production standpoint, it looks like a game that I would play. I would own. From a production standpoint, even though I got no interest in one versus all games by general, I admit it does look like if you were to show me this game, I would go, that seems really cool
Hmm.
without knowing what the game was about, especially when you account the fact that this 2001 A Space Odyssey, the board game, is adapting a 20-minute segment of a 2-hour movie. It's like you're taking one plot aspect of the entire movie and blowing it up to being a one versus all kill or be killed game that you're trying to defeat Hal before Hal kills everybody. I'm really curious to see how they pull this off, but there's a part of me that thinks that this is not really a proper use of this IP, but that's just me.
I just don't understand why even bother with the IP when you could have just used an AI themed science fiction game and that would be the end of it. I think one of the points of using an IP for a game is when the IP either has something unique that you think you can bring onto the board game for whatever reason, tapping us onto nostalgia or whatever. But in this case, as you said, only the older players are going to be tapped by nostalgia. So why pay money to use an IP that you don't need on a topic that is so current today that you could theme it around anything else where an AI is going against, kind of humanity and do some sort of pandemic game with one versus everybody and save some money. So I don't understand why going for.
I love you hit the nail on the head. I think that would be wonderful. Not necessarily mimicking verbatim the pandemic formula the way
No.
Iberia did, but the idea of a cooperative game of you trying to stop either an AI or a virus. It just seems like that there could be some interesting to go there.
If they wanted a real, current IP on that, and this is not me, please never ever think that I am endorsing the movie, but it is everything to do with the latest Mission Impossible installments.
Yes.
Please don't go and watch the film. Save yourself 3 hours of your life. Just know that at the end, everything is going to be fine. That's it. But please, please, please don't bother with the film. It was like
I did. I saw it too.
Oh, so painful.
I saw it in the theater. It was so painful.
Oh my God.
I just saw F1 the movie, and it just feels to me like, yeah, it just feels like whenever it comes to Hollywood filmmaking now, it seems like 80% of the film has to be exposition, and I don't understand why we have to make films this way anymore.
And also, there's something about that film that really irked me so much, and it's time management. Okay, in the movie, just humans, just so you know, in the movie you have, I think it's 4 days to finish, to stop the end of the world.
Yeah.
And in those 4 days, they do something like 10 days of flying from one place to another. Literally, you count the hours that it's going to take you to go from Austria to London, from London to the North Pole, from the North Pole to South Africa. Then going, by the way, not just flying, but they're sailing. They're on a boat, and on a boat you have to go from the middle of the Atlantic to the north of the Atlantic. That is a 5 days journey. What are you doing? And believe me, you cannot go from London Bridge to King's Cross St. Pancras running in 5 minutes.
Tom is a fast runner.
In 5 minutes, and have 3 minutes to then get out of a series of tunnels that are going to collapse without having King's Cross St. Pancras collapsing on top of those tunnels. That movie left London without a rail system and no mention of. Sorry, it really pissed me off, that film. Pretty much every 2 minutes, I had something to be annoyed about.
Well, like I said, it's the same way for me. I agree, because I watched that film and it was getting me very angry. I'd say, find the film once it gets on streaming, fast forward to the last half an hour, go, ooh, that is some amazing stunt work, and then turn it off.
Yeah.
I saw F1, and F1 you can't do that too, because F1's amazing racing sequences are peppered throughout the entire film. And you will, if you have any appreciation for cinema, my jaw was dropping at the quality and how good a cinema was. But then you have to kind of, for a film that was fully endorsed by F1 to the point that they had full cooperation to make the film, and to be that completely oblivious to, like, for me, one of my issues, what was that? What was that?
Well, F1 did actually help with the film, except that the cars that they are driving, especially the actors, are not F1 cars, because they thought they were going to be way too powerful. So they took, I think it's Formula 3 cars, and then they dressed up, the whole chassis.
And in most of the sequences, the Apex cars are digitally added into the racing sequences. Correct. Because they were not allowed to race them alongside an actual F1 race.
Correct. So there were some limitations in there. There's a little bit of
true. I mean, they had cooperation, but it wasn't going to hijack a race for that sequence. I always love, one of my favorite stories about racing. I'll finish my review. So F1, great movie when you look at the cinema, but it comes down to a situation where Brad Pitt is a 50-plus-year-old coming into Formula One after a 30-year absence. That's his storyline, to resurrect this failing backtrack team. And I immediately went, that's never going to happen. And I was telling my brother-in-law, Mickey, who saw the film with me, he was just like, well, he mentioned there were a bunch of other F1 drivers in their 50s that were still F1 champions. I went, yeah. But when those guys were champions, the cars were driving half as fast and pulling half as many Gs. Like, people don't realize how fast and how much the technology has improved in the 30, 40 years since these 50-year-olds were getting trophies. And there was something called Crashgate that happened about 15 or so years ago. And where a team got basically got permanently banned from racing because of one incident that this team in this movie do about 4 or 5 times. And they're just like, oh no, they would not be allowed to get away with this. They would have been kicked off the track the first time they did it, not the least of which the 3rd or 4th time they did it. And so there's some things you have to get over. But I always remember a great film in the 70s called Le Mans that starred Steve McQueen, who was an actual professional race car driver at the time. And they filmed the film at Le Mans. They had their own car that was built to race. And so they did all their racing with Steve McQueen driving a lot of the time. And they got all the racing footage during the race with their car. So their car had to be race spec. It had to qualify. And the hilarious thing is that they got so much footage, but the priority was the footage. But there were so many noteworthy crashes and disqualifications that the producers and the director realized that if they didn't bring the car in to change the film stock, they actually had a chance of winning the race. But they decided that the producers and the executives and the money people were like, well, it's like, well, no, you went to shoot a film. You can't just come back with a trophy and go, well, we didn't shoot the film, but we got the trophy. So they had to, so they decided that no, we are here to get footage. And so I always remember that story, the fact that in this film, of course, they had to be digital back in the 70s when they shot Le Mans. They actually had a full race spec car that they were racing, and they did all that. A good chunk of their footage was recorded during the event. But anyway, that's enough for a quick aside about that stuff. Well, speaking of history, though, ding ding, we were taking a conversation about historical board games, specifically games dealing with history. And when I checked my collection, I realized I virtually didn't have any. I mean, there are games that talk about locations, and there are games that have political aspects to it, implications. But games that specifically detail historical events, I actually don't have very many. I have Lisboa, which I actually still haven't played, which is a Vitella Lacerda game and dealing with the famous fire in Lisbon back in 1755, suffered an earthquake and a massive fire. And there's a game I would rate pretty highly called The Grizzled. Have you ever played The Grizzled?
I have not.
The Grizzled is a fascinating cooperative game that deals with World War I in the trenches. And it is got a wonderful art style, and it's a little bit it's kind of dark in its way, but you're basically trying to get these people to survive. It's been such a long time since I played the game, but yeah, you basically trying to get these guys to survive the trenches of World War One. It's got a very unique French illustrator. It's got if you ever see like stuff, like French cartoonists did, especially in the 70s and 80s, it very much mimics that style. You have characters; they develop psychological problems during it, and it's a very fascinating game. They made a expansion for this, but this is a game I don't think anyone really talks about. It's The Grizzled. Came out in 2015, which is surprising. I thought it was an older game than that. Railroad Revolution, which is another game that's inspired by that. Coimbra, but I just played a game that is historical subjects called Autobahn.
Autobahn, okay.
Which you can see behind me.
Yes, I can. It rings a bell, that game.
I would say it's relatively new. It came out, to see here, Autobahn, I want to say came out in 2022, so it's relatively new. It came off of a Kickstarter, designers Fabio Lopiano and Nestor Mangoni, and it's published by Alley Cat Games. I've played Coimbra, which was another historical game, which I liked. I haven't played Lisboa, but I'm expecting to like it because I like almost everything Vitella Lacerda does. This definitely implies that they were taking a Vitella Lacerda playbook, and they unfortunately did not succeed in making a particularly well-engaging game. My wife absolutely did not like it. Ultimately, the issue comes down to what the game's about. So if you look over here behind me, you'll see the board. And the board is a representation of the beginning of the Autobahn and the reconstruction of Germany. And that's ultimately what this game is really about. Even though it's called Autobahn, it's not about racing. It is about building and reconstructing Germany after World War II. And the way they do that was to rebuild the Autobahn right after World War II. So oddly enough, you might think, well, that means there would be East and West Germany, and you are correct. There is a line that goes down the center of the board, and you are entirely Western reconstructions. So you start on one side of the board, the side that faces the West, and so you have roads that go off the board that lead to Paris and Boston and a few other places to the west. So they go off to the west, and you actually don't have access to the east side of the board for 70 to 80% of the game. So the game, each player is a nameless administrator that is tasked with properly rebuilding Germany's road infrastructure in lieu of World War II. You you basically have a handful of cards that are color coded, and you can see the board. The roads are all color coded, yellow, green, blue, what have you. You have certain actions across your little board, and which you can see right there. And you play the cards atop this board. And so if you play a red card on a build a road, you can build a road on a red road. If you do an upgrade action with a blue card, you can upgrade a blue road. Seems pretty simple. Each action has a top limit of number of actions you can do before you have to recall your cards back into your hand. Everything costs Deutschmarks, so there's a monetary aspect to the game. And on top of all that, there's also a pick up and deliver aspect. Once you build these roads and you connect towns either outside of Germany or within the cities within Germany, you can then take your little vehicle, put these little adorable little crates. They're like little color coded crates. Can we see them? Little color coded crates that you put on the vehicle. Kind of adorable. And then you can move them from one point to another. And if you deliver a type of a good that the town wants, you get an additional bonus. You also get bonuses for building roads. You get bonuses for this. But the whole point of the game is it really has nothing to do with the rebuilding itself. Two of the actions, I might want to add, only two of the actions brings these administrator tokens. You have a whole stack of them, and you're trying to put them on the bottom of this tracker. So if you build a yellow road, you get to put an administrator on the yellow road tracker. And since there's a limit of how many guys you can put on, let's say I put a guy on, then you put a guy on yellow. When I put my next guy on yellow, it pushes the first guy off, and he gets promoted to one of these point trackers. And these point trackers, you get points depending on how well you built your infrastructure. So you can lay down gas stations. Gas stations don't bring you guys, but they will give you points on where your guys are. So if you build a road, you put a guy there, and then eventually, hopefully, he'll promote, and you can move him up the ranks of this tracker. And if, for example, you manage to put away and put out all of your gas stations, and they actually have little gas station, little wooden tokens. If you manage to put those all out, you get points depending on where your guy is. So if your guy is on the top level, you get 3 points for every gas station guy you put out. So there is an interrelationship between these two. So the gas station one doesn't put down a guy. Building a road puts down a guy, but you get points depending on how many gas stations you put out. That is one of the trackers. If you deliver, and I think you can see it right here, every country has their own good. Every time you deliver a good, you can put a little token on top of the country. You get points for, once again, how many different countries that you have delivered to. And then the final one, if I remember correctly, because we just played this game, the last tracker is the number of guys you have on this bottom area. So if you've built a lot of different roads in a lot of different colors, you can also get points for that. And if you fail to bring your guys up these tracker, you also get 2 points for every guy you've promoted from the bottom to the lobby. And so you could have a lot of guys in this lobby. You get 2 points for every one of those. And then there's a final tracker for getting points for how much money you have. Although that's more of a desperation because you just can't, And of course, the funny thing is, you may think that's pretty simple, but there's a whole technology tracker. There's another action that allows you to unlock abilities on your board that makes you more powerful. And those abilities unlock this tracker. So you can't even put guys up on this point tracker until you've unlocked the technology. Are you following yet? Are you confused yet?
Very.
And I even talked about the fact that you can upgrade roads, which puts down guys. You can also, and then of course, then there's the entire goods transport, which you may think that I haven't mentioned it, but remember, if you deliver goods, that allows you to get bonuses. And on top of that, the only way to get some of the bonuses is to have your technology track. And one thing you may not see is it's kind of hiding on a completely separate board way at the bottom. It's where there's a tracker where you advance another meeple, a completely different meeple, and as you move that guy, it's the only mechanic, one of the only mechanics in the game that allows you to advance these guys up. So there's yet another mechanic on top of all of these other mechanics, which is a separate device that is the only thing that allows you to promote your administrators up this ladder. So in many ways, it is an administrative game, heavily administration. And the funky thing is that the game has 3 eras, and the eras are dictated by the number of roads you put out. So you put out the first set of roads. After you give out 10, all the costs go up a little bit. And then once you've given out 12 roads, the costs go up again. But when you enter the third era, the game completely changes. And at that point, all the roadblocks separating the east and west could come down, because now this is reunification. We've now reached reunification, and the game expands this whole additional road. And now you get like 16 road sections. But once that 16 goes out, the game is over. Now, the only issue you might have is that about 80% of the game is actually in the west. Once you get to the east, because your engine is so good, you're going to give out those 16 road segments so quickly, the game is going to end about 20, 30 minutes after. So this board here barely ever gets touched. And the other thing is that you can completely screw yourself over on this board. For example, one of the upgrades you can do allows you, as I said, there's a maximum number of cards you can put here. You can only build 3 roads before you've maxed out the road building. You can only upgrade a road twice before you max out that. And you can only put out 1 gas station initially. But you can upgrade those. The only issue is that there's only 10 gas stations, which means if you've upgraded that gas station and you've delivered all these little gas stations, this action is gone. You never use it, so why bother upgrading? The same thing goes with doing technology. Once you've upgraded unlocked all your technology, that action becomes locked out. So there's only 3 or 4 actions here that you should bother upgrading, and if you don't, you can get really screwed, as you have a bunch of action cards and no place to do them, so you're wasting time putting cards in your hand. Now, on top of all of that, the cards are not just color-coded. The cards have additional actions you can do, because you can upgrade those cards with additional cards. But those additional actions are so specific and so situational, you'll barely ever use them, which means this game has another, on top of this, a hand management mechanic that you have to play, but is itself only pops up 2 or 3 times in the entire game. So there's a whole mechanic that I haven't even barely dove into, where you're also doing hand management. So we have hand management, administration, up the corporate ladder, money management, tech trees, and a pick up and deliver. So we now have 4 or 5 different mechanics. And unfortunately, they are all basically half-baked, because there's so many almost mini games going on all at once. It's very difficult to establish a strategy. I kind of did. I basically went with trying to deploy all of my gas stations, which I did. But it also created a situation where I was compelled to try to finish the game as quickly as possible, because I had reached my point-making potential by going this path. So my wife was still trying to figure out what her strategy was, and I was racing to end the game, because for the last half an hour of the game, there was virtually nothing I could do. I had put out all of my guys. I had promoted all of my guys. I had all my tech done, and I was limited on my actions. And so the final half an hour of the game, usually a game that has an engine to it, it doesn't want to end. It wants to end before you reach your maximum potential. So you feel that the next time you play the game, you can try another strategy in order to create another engine. But this game, you massively overbuild your engine, and you do it, and you're like, oh, my engine is completely built. I have every upgrade. I have every guy out. I have everything out. I have every single thing I'd want. And the game keeps going for another 20 minutes. You're not going like, why are we still playing this game? My wife, her opinion was that this game because of the 5 or 6 different mini games going on at once, she couldn't strategize because it was just chaos. So the only thing you could do was just vomit as much stuff onto Germany, which I just realized, given Germany, that was probably not the great vomiting onto Germany.
I ain't saying nothing, mate.
You have to vomit as much of your of your play onto Germany as possible without any strategy because everything is going on all at once. So she absolutely did not like the game. I felt that the game overstayed its welcome by about 45 minutes.
That's a long time.
Yeah, well, because they obviously had this neat idea that half the board opens up and you got to move into East Germany, which was neat, except the fact that you still played 2 hours of the game in just one section. So why do you lock out half the board for 2 hours of a 2.5 to 3 hour game? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the promoting employees is tricky. The unlocking these things is annoying. I like to pick up a deliver aspect, but the game never really fully explains how it plays. So like we were having issues trying to figure out like, do you deliver when the vehicle goes off the board, or do you just have to deliver it to a destination? But like we got the impression that you had to deliver it off the board. And one of the more annoying things is that you can only move the vehicle if it's on a color code and you play a colored action, which means if you are on a yellow road and you put down the yellow action to get it to move, if it doesn't reach its destination, which it often never does, if that vehicle stays on that board for 20 minutes as you have to do other actions, bring up your hand back in your board just so you can play that yellow action again to get that vehicle to its destination, which can be very frustrating, especially since for the majority of the game, you only have one vehicle. You eventually get a second vehicle, but good luck mitigating those two. It's very frustrating because at the beginning of the game, you only get one vehicle and you have a limit of one action you can do. So you have to upgrade that action just to put out the second vehicle. It gets very, very frustrating. They say 90 to 120 minutes. That's definitely closer to 2.5 hours for a first playthrough. It says age 14 and up. I think the complexity level puts it way to 17 to 18 and up. I give this game a 5 out of 10. But once again, it's thematic to what we were talking about. This is a historical based game because it deals with the time period after World War II, pre-unification and post-unification. I just would have preferred, apparently people describe the game very similar to Brass, but it fails in replicating Brass's luster and appeal. So that's my review for Autobahn by Fabio Lopiano and Nestor Mangione.
I don't know if this is going to make you feel any good or not, but you have actually managed to convince me not to go anywhere near that game.
It is. There is a lot. I mean, when you play a Vitel Lacerda game, there's a lot going on. But I've always felt as if there was a central cohesion. Like there was a central mechanic. There was something. It's almost like when you're a director, you want your center action in the center of the screen, so you focus on it. That's how George Miller made Mad Max. You focus on the center. And I think Vitel's genius in the fact he creates games that are so complex, but there's something in the center or central to your mind that you can focus on. Vinhos had a similar thing. There was a lot going on, but there was a central mechanic. This game has 4 different mechanics going on at the same time. And I had the same problem with Ruins of Arnak, which a lot of people love, but I had an issue with because it was 3 different games going on at the same time, and you had to keep track of all 3 of them.
Well, as I said, I am not coming anywhere near this game ever. So there you go.
Hey, we got a new review in.
Yeah, that's good because I don't know when I'm gonna be able to play games again. Oh my god, summer is coming, and that's going to make board gaming life very complicated because all my friends are going on holidays or they rent apartments so they can go away. So I don't know when I'm gonna be able to play games again. So we'll see. In any case, we're gonna take soon our summer break, where we rest and recoup. But not yet. But anyway, I don't have anything else for today. Do you have anything else for?
No, that was it. I'm committed to get into some more board games. hopefully very, very soon.
I will when I can. No promises, because I don't like to promise what I know I'm not going to be able to deliver. But anyway, humans, if you have already played Autobahn, I would love to hear what you have to say. And if you think that the game sounds so unappealing as I do, based on Chris's review, because it made it sound like really complicated and not really very satisfying. I can think of many better ways to spend one afternoon than 3 hours of fighting with a game that has too many games within it. So anyway, listeners, let us know what you think. If you played Autobahn, I would love to hear your opinion. And if you think you have something that you could tell me that would make me like this game, I would love to hear it, because I rather like than dislike games. No, I don't like it. So anyway, thank you very much indeed for being there. By all means, do send us an email on podcast@gmsmagazine.com, where I promise that I will answer it sooner rather than later. Or find me on Blue Sky. Links are going to be in the show notes. Facebook also, and my Twitter account is still there, but pretty unmonitored.
It's Chris from DSX Machina. Find me on all things under that label, and also Tavern Snaps, my crackers, which are doing quite well.
Good. Congratulations. Let's see if you, at some point you can open a Spanish branch.
Nice.
That would be awesome. But until next time,
take care.
Take care.